There is a moment that most of us have experienced at least once. A moment when something happens, something we did not choose, something we cannot undo, and the mind goes very still. Not peaceful. Still, the kind of stillness that comes just before a wave of resistance. Before we begin arguing with reality. Tonight, we are going to sit with a philosopher who spent his entire life asking one question. Not, how do I get what I want? Not, how do I avoid what I fear? But something harder, something stranger. What if I could love it all? My name is not important. What matters is this: for the next 15 minutes or so, you have nowhere else to be. Nothing to fix, nothing to resist. Only this voice. And the quiet, and the thought of a man who walked alone through the mountains of Switzerland, half-blind, chronically ill, and utterly, ferociously alive. Part 1. The Man Behind the Fire. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in a small village in Saxony, Germany. His father died when he was 4 years old. He grew up surrounded by women, his mother, his sister, his grandmother, in a household that was devoutly Christian, deeply kind, and entirely unprepared for the kind of mind that was developing quietly at the dinner table. By 24, he was a professor of classical philology at the University of Basel, the youngest professor in the university's history. By 30, he was already beginning to question everything he had been trained to defend. By 40, he had written some of the most electric and disturbing philosophy the Western world had ever read. And by 44, he collapsed on a street in Turin, threw his arms around a horse that was being beaten, and never fully recovered his mind. He lived another 11 years, unable to write, unable, most days, to recognize what he had created. He suffered enormously, and yet, the central teaching of his philosophy was the love of fate. Amor Fati, in Latin, love of fate. Not tolerance of fate, not endurance of fate. Love. Part 2, what Amor Fati actually means. The phrase sounds simple. Love your fate. Accept what is. And it is often misread as a kind of passive resignation, a philosophical shrug. Whatever happens, happens. There is nothing to be done. That is not what Nietzsche meant, not even close. Nietzsche was one of the most ferociously active philosophers who ever lived. He believed in effort, in creation, in becoming. In the constant, difficult, exhilarating work of making yourself into something real. Amor Fati was not a reason to stop. It was the fuel. Here is how he put it himself, in The Gay Science, written in 1882, one of the few times he stated his philosophy in a single, clear passage. He wrote that he wanted to learn, to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Not to wage war against what is ugly, not to accuse, and not even to accuse those who accuse. Looking away, he said, would be his only negation, and Amor Fati would be his love. Read that slowly. He is not saying, pretend the ugly things are not ugly. He is not saying, convince yourself that pain is pleasant. He is saying something far more difficult and far more interesting than either of those. He is saying, what if you stopped spending your life fighting the terms of your existence and started working with them? Part 3. The weight you carry. Think for a moment about something you resist. Not something you are actively working to change, something you resist, in the way that changes nothing except the quality of your days. Maybe it is something that happened years ago. A loss, a failure, a path not taken, a version of yourself you had planned to be and somehow didn't become. Maybe it is something more present, a limitation of your body, a circumstance you didn't choose, a door that closed. Whatever it is, notice how much energy goes into not accepting it. The low-level argument you have with reality. The thought, barely conscious, running like a program beneath everything, that things should be different, that you should have been given a different starting point, a different set of conditions, a different life. Nietzsche would not have told you that thought is wrong. He was too honest for that. He would have told you something simpler. He would have said, that argument is costing you your life. Part 4. The Eternal Return. To understand Amor Fati fully, you need to understand what Nietzsche called the eternal return. It is one of his most famous and most challenging ideas. He imagined a thought experiment. What if you had to live your life again? Not approximately, not with a few corrections, exactly as it has been. Every moment, every choice, every painful hour, every small embarrassment, every loss, every joy, every ordinary Tuesday, and then again, and again, for all of eternity. He called this the greatest weight, the heaviest question a person can be asked. Could you choose that? Could you say, yes, again, exactly like this? I would choose it all again. Nietzsche was not suggesting this is literally true. He was using it as a test, a filter, a way of asking, how are you living? Because the person who can say yes to the eternal return is not someone who has had an easy life. It is someone who has made something real out of whatever life they were given. Someone who has stopped waiting for the terms to change. Someone who has found a way to love what is. Part 5. What this looks like in practice. I want to be careful here. Because Amor Fati, real Amor Fati, is not a performance. It is not saying cheerful things about your situation while privately seething. It is not toxic positivity dressed in philosophical clothing. Nietzsche was a man who suffered genuinely and deeply. He had debilitating migraines that lasted for days. He had eye problems that made reading painful. He was lonely, profoundly, chronically lonely, for most of his adult life. He did not pretend otherwise. What he did was something different. He wrote in one of his notebooks, "Only great pain is the ultimate liberator of the spirit. Not comfortable pain, not manageable pain. Great pain." He believed, and this is the crucial part, that the things which are hardest also go deepest. That the person who has suffered and not been destroyed by it has access to something that the person who has only ever been comfortable cannot quite reach. A kind of profundity, a kind of seriousness, a kind of knowing that cannot be borrowed or imitated. It can only be lived into. Part 6. Become who you are. There is one more piece to this. Nietzsche had a phrase that he returned to again and again across his writing. It comes originally from the ancient Greek poet Pindar, but Nietzsche made it his own. Become who you are. It sounds straightforward. It is not. He was not talking about discovering a fixed inner self that has been waiting patiently inside you for the right moment to emerge. He didn't believe in that kind of fixed self. What he meant was something more active, more demanding. He meant, take everything you have been given, including the parts you didn't choose, including the suffering, including the limitations, including the particular, specific, unrepeatable shape of your one life, and make something of it. Not in spite of those things, through them. This is what Amor Fati looks like from the inside. Not resignation, not cheerful acceptance, but a kind of fierce, creative, unflinching yes. A yes that sees clearly and chooses anyway. Part 7. Tonight. Here, in the quiet of this particular night. Whatever today brought with it, whatever weight is still sitting somewhere in your chest or your shoulders, I want to offer you something Nietzsche spent a lifetime working toward. Not a solution, not a cure, but a different relationship to what is. The day is done. What it contained. You cannot revise it. You cannot send it back. You can only, if you choose, begin the long, patient, genuinely difficult practice of finding something in it worth saying yes to. Not tonight. Not all at once. But the direction of yes can begin here. In the dark. In the quiet. In the simple act of letting the day be what it was. Without the argument. Nietzsche wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it. That is a high bar, maybe the highest bar anyone has ever set, but it begins somewhere ordinary. It begins with a body growing heavy, with a breath releasing the day, with the quiet decision not to fight the night. Let your body rest now. Let your thoughts move slowly toward nothing in particular. Let the silence be enough. Let this moment be enough. Let you be enough. Amor Fati. Love of fate. Love of this. Right now. Exactly as it is. Sleep well.